Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. And here in this standard battle on the Himmelsdorf map, we're going to be watching Flex Air in the old but gold Soviet Tier 10 heavy tank, the IS-7. Ah yes, the IS-7. This tank has been around for a while in World of Tanks. In fact, it's been around since the very beginning. For a long time, the IS-7, along with the Mouse, were the only two Tier 10 heavy tanks in the game. In fact, they were the only two Tier 10s in the game. Only heavy tanks went up to Tier 10. Medium stopped at Tier 9, as did tank destroyers. Light tanks, I think, only went up to Tier 6. But things change. And with change comes power creep. Oh, before we continue, I just want to draw your attention to chat, where one of the team's two Object 704s, not the one who Flex Air just barged past here, the other one. I don't know if you caught it, he just announced to the team that if he got spotted before he fired his first shot, he was going to quit out of the match. Yeah, sometimes it's not all about you, princess. Anyway, back to Flex Air, which, it's fair to say, has suffered from power creep over the years, as has the Jagdtiger over there, which used to be the most fearsome tank destroyer in the game, and now isn't. You can see what the Jagdtiger's trying to do there. In fact, he has done it. He's trying to do the same thing that Flex Air is doing in the IS-7, using the rubble blocking the road to shield his vulnerable lower places. The problem is that while the IS-7 is eminently capable of making good use of a position like this, because it has a turret that is basically impenetrable regardless of how much gold you throw at it, the Jagdtiger does not. The IS-7, however, despite the fact that it has definitely been power creeped over the years, is still extremely strong in this kind of position. And while it's technically not true, despite what I said earlier, that the IS-7 is basically impenetrable when hauled down like this, the hatches on top are only 30mm thick. But in practice, since they are actually recessed into the top of the turret, they are functionally impossible to hit. Despite the fact that Flex Air is moving around like this between shots while reloading, in order to minimise the chances of anybody hitting anything vulnerable on top of his turret, when in actual fact, although this is a good habit to get into in the IS-7 in a hold down position like this, it's not something that you really need to bother with. Instead, all the enemy really have to shoot at is your turret front, which has an effective armour of anything between 350 to up to 700mm. So good luck with that. In fact, I'd even argue the case that despite just about every other veteran tank in World of Tanks, like the unfortunate Jagdtiger that he just killed, being affected by severe power creep in one way or another over the years, the IS-7 is arguably stronger when in this kind of hold down position than it has ever been at any point during the game's development. And that, of course, is because they've removed armour-piercing shells from artillery. I can remember the fun I used to have in my IS-7 when in a hold down position like this, having a great time. Until an American T-92 noticed me and loaded an armour-piercing shell, dropped it on my engine deck and one-shotted me from full health to nothing. And that was not an unusual occurrence. I hear people say that artillery is worse now since they've had the armour-piercing shells removed and the stun mechanic has been introduced. To those people, I say, you have really short memories. Although on the one hand I can kind of see their point. I'm not for a second trying to argue that artillery is actually fun to play against in World of Tanks, I'm just saying that it used to be a lot worse. One area where I certainly wouldn't argue that the IS-7 has been fairly heavily power creeped is in its gun performance. It does have fairly high alpha damage. I mean, this is a 130mm gun. But the DPM is absolutely terrible. It's got the second worst DPM of any Tier 10 heavy tank. It's also got the worst penetration among Russian Tier 10 heavy tanks. And that's a pretty impressive achievement. I mean, have you seen how many Tier 10 heavy tanks the Russians have got? There are 11 of them, including two versions of the IS-7. Admittedly, some of those 11 are very, very hard to get, but they are there. And the IS-7's armour-piercing penetration of 250, which was amazing back when this was the only Tier 10 Russian tank in the game, But, well, those days are long gone, and it now, in fact, has the worst standard armour-piercing penetration of any of the Soviet Tier 10 heavy tanks. In fact, there aren't many Tier 10 heavy tanks that have worse armour-piercing penetration regardless of the nation of the tank involved. The only things that have worse standard penetration than the IS-7 at Tier 10 amongst the heavy tanks are the various different variants of the Chinese 113 and all of the Germans. So it's perhaps not unsurprising to see IS-7 drivers going into battle equipped with a metric shit-ton of gold and relying heavily on their 2-key, and Flexair here is no exception, although to be fair he did run through all of his armour piercing before switching to the gold, although he did start this battle with more than 2/3 of his ammunition loadout being gold in the first place. But well, then again, 70% of the ammo being fired at him is gold as well, so I guess what goes around comes around. And what's coming around right now is the entire enemy team, because he is now the last surviving tank on his team, with only 427 health remaining and facing 4 enemies, only one of which at least is Tier 10, this Centurion. Oh, the Baraska's reloaded. That's not good. He really needs to kill that Centurion. Well, he needs to kill the Barask too. Well, he needs to kill all of them, but between the Centurion and the Barask, they're carving him up. So he's gotten rid of the Barask, the Centurion. Oh, here comes the IS-3. Okay, well, the IS-3, not so much of a threat, not now that he's fired. Finish off the Centurion, and then get yourself back into a defensive position before the IS-3 can reload and come out and try again. This really is not much. I mean, the IS-3 could kill him. He could load high explosive. And if he has any sense whatsoever, that's exactly what the IS-3 is going to do. Flexair, anxious to kill him before he does that, and leaves him on 1 health. Well, you know, to be fair, that wasn't actually a low damage roll. The IS-7's 130mm gun has an average damage of 490, so that was actually a high damage roll. It just wasn't quite high enough. Well, no Kolobanov's medal, or at least potentially no Kolobanov's medal, because he was only fighting alone against 4 enemy tanks rather than 5. But that one remaining enemy tank is entirely capable of killing him, the Su-130PM. Hell, any of them would have been capable of killing him if they hit him with a high explosive shell. But the Su-130PM in particular, even though it is only a Tier 8 tank destroyer, is the kind of Tier 8 tank destroyer that Tier 10 heavy tanks dismiss at their peril, because it very much has a Tier 10 gun. It's also a 130mm gun. It has slightly worse standard penetration than the IS-7's gun, better gold penetration than the IS-7's gun, better alpha damage than the IS-7 with 520 average damage, and a superior rate of fire and therefore higher DPM to boot. Although the Su-130PM isn't going to need 520 alpha damage, 96 would do, because that's all that Flexair has left. The gun, however, even though it is superior to Flexair's gun, is not the main thing that Flexair needs to worry about here. It's the fact that the Su-130PM has vastly better concealment, although that's not really too much of an advantage. At least, not if you stick to the streets, as Flexair here is doing, because while there's a lot of cover in the streets, around the various different street corners, there's not an awful lot in the way of actual concealment. So, with the wreck of the Centurion blocking any fire from his right-hand side, and with his butt nestled up into the ruined building behind him, to prevent the application of any kind of surprise butt sex, even though it is the best kind of butt sex, Flexair has positioned himself in such a manner as to enable him to hopefully get the first shot off against the most likely avenue of attack that the Su-130PM is going to exploit here. And hopefully the Su-130PM has less than 490 health remaining, because Flexair, in case you hadn't noticed, only has 2 shots left in his tank. Now, he did hit the Su-130 earlier. He got a kind of a low damage roll, did 420 damage. But that 420 is crucial, because it means he's not going to need 3 shots to kill the Su-130. Hopefully he'll only need 1, but he may need as many as 2. and that's good, because 2's all he's got. Although this does kind of beg the question, where is the SU-130? Why didn't he attack when Flexair was being swarmed by up to 3 enemies? If he had, Flexair would definitely be dead now, but he didn't. And you can't count on him being AFK either. He's got 5 kills. So you have to assume that whatever he's doing, and wherever he's doing it, it's for a good reason. And it may be that he is on very low health, and he's trying to hide in whatever concealment is available on the Himmelsdorf map in order to ambush Flexair when he's forced to go looking for him, as he is now. And he's spotted. Back up, back up, back up, back up, back up. So Flexair did get spotted, but he did not spot the SU-130 in return. And there's a very good reason for this, because despite the fact that there are long, clear fields of view and fire on the streets on the Himmelsdorf map with no actual concealment, that does not mean that you cannot get spotted by something at the end of one of these long roads that you cannot see in return. That, unfortunately, depends on just how good your view range is, and the IS-7's view range is kind of shit, and who it is who's doing the spotting, and how good their concealment is, and the SU-130PM is a tank destroyer. And it definitely has better concealment than the IS-7. And it saw him, and it knows he's coming, and it would really suck to lose a game where you just earned a Radley Walters medal and done 10,600 damage. Fortunately for Flexair, the SU-130PM either is AFK in a superb ambush position, or he's just enjoying the butt sex so much that he's just going to roll over and let it happen. Which, when you look at it, is really good news for Flexair, because it would have really sucked to have lost a battle where you got 9 kills and did over 11,000 damage, which is what he did here. Now, on the one hand, you could be looking at this result and thinking, man, if only there'd been one more enemy tank, he could have gotten 10 kills, a Pools medal, and a Kolobanov's medal. And yeah, that's true. But I think this is one of those examples of a case where you really need to be careful what you wish for, because if there had been one more enemy tank, he probably wouldn't have won, and that would have really sucked. So I suspect Flexair was just grateful that he did survive, and he did win, and he did get the Radley Walters medal, the Spartan, the Steel Wall, the High Caliber, and the Top Gun. But because he finished the SU-130PM with the last shot left in his tank, he also got the very rare Faden's medal. So, yeah, let's not be greedy. That will do. 11,281 damage, 1,658 base experience. What he did not get out of this battle, however, was a lot of cash. In fact, he lost nearly 11,000 credits. But that, quite literally, is the price that you have to pay for going into battle with a slightly more than 2-to-1 ratio of gold to regular armour-piercing ammunition. A price which, given this result, I'm pretty sure Flexair was entirely happy to pay. Hope you enjoyed today's battle, folks, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.